don't go in the cornfield. You'll get lost and the bears will get you. Now this was a warning to me as a 6-year-old little boy on our corn farm in Champaign County, Champaign County, Illinois, when I grew up in 1956 when I was 6. Now, it reminded me of similar warnings told to 6-year-old boys like me, like, don't put beans in your nose, which seemed odd because I'd never seen anybody put beans in their nose, nor had I ever seen anyone with any evidence of having planted a bean in their nose at a previous time. Or the warnings like, don't drink your daddy's coffee, it'll turn your knees black. I had never seen anybody with black knees. Or, don't tease your big sister, you'll get clobbered. Now, that one I verified. But don't go in the cornfield, you'll get lost and the bears will get you. Now, Champaign County, Illinois is in the middle of what I call flatland. Flatland was created when 20,000 years ago the Ice Age ended and the giant glacier retreated across the central part of America, leaving absolutely flat land. So flat that you can see for 20 miles in all directions, and there's no distractions of trees or hills or rivers or valleys, just flat. And when that glacier retreated, it left a great huge prairie and wetlands. Now, those of us who are raised in flatland, we share many distinct characteristics. One of which is we all have giant imaginations because you live with this big open sky. And particularly in the spring of the year, just as you get ready to plant all the crops, it's just big open sky and just soil as far as you can see in all directions. So you just got this blank canvas to just imagine whatever, and you don't have all those distractions like you folks have here of all these animals and plants and hills and mountains. You can just imagine anything. And secondly, we have an absolutely perfect sense of direction. We never get lost. Because when they came in there in 1870 and drained the wetlands in the Great Prairie, and this was all just flat and square, they said, okay, we're going to put farms out here. Let's see how we do it. Well, I don't see any reason. We'll just make 1 mile squares every single place, and we'll make all the squares exactly go north, south, east, and west. So if you look at flat land from a satellite, you'll see today it's just a big piece of graph paper. And so whenever we build our houses, you always build the house so it faces the road. That means the walls in your houses are always north, south, east, and west. It's a great shock to me when I came to the South that you could not say to somebody, go in there to my office, would you, and get that folder that's on the south side of my desk. They just look at you like, you're from another, well, I am from another world. We always know. We always know our direction. If I ever don't, or any flatlander doesn't know know the directions, they get that sorted out right away. So we have big imaginations. We always know where we are. We never get lost. And because of this wide open space, we have this hankering for some place to hide. Because, sometimes it's just too much. It's just too big. And so you just sort of feel like you want to, get down in a little holler somewhere, a little hole, and just kind of hide and maybe think of something to do that maybe you wouldn't want anybody else to see. Because I knew that in flatland, you saw just about everything, because I rode around in the car with Mom and Daddy after church, and we'd go by the Kesslers, and Mom would say, the Kesslers' beans have a lot of weeds in them today. They're getting behind on their weeding. And then we'd drive by the Bidners, and they'd say, look at all those cars in their driveway. I wonder what's going on at the Bidners. Or heaven forbid, they'd say, oh, look at that junky stuff behind Mr. Ward's house. He needs to get that cleaned up. Well, you just can't hide anything in flatland. Yeah. So we have this hankering, especially as little boys, to find us some place we can hide. Well, it was August in the year I was about to turn 7. And it was hot. It was hotter than hot. Really, really hot and humid, like it can be in flatland. And we were having dinner. Now, for those of you who don't understand about flatland, we never have lunch in flatland. Nobody ever has lunch. It was a noonday meal. It's dinner, and then you have leftover supper. Okay. So we were having dinner, and Mom and Daddy were talking about the crop. And they were saying things I was so happy to hear, because I'd heard them before, and I knew how happy it would make everybody feel and think. They were saying, you know, that corn is as high as an elephant's eye and it's reaching up, you know, that song. They were saying that kind of stuff. And Mama would say, that corn is black. And that's what she'd say when those leaves were just as green, as dark green as they could possibly be. But then they got to talking about the drought that we were in. Because they were saying, this crop will be the one that helps us pay off that brand new tractor we've got if we just get a rain. If we just get a rain. Now, my Mom and Daddy loved being corn farmers. My daddy, he just thought so much about this crop he was privileged to grow. And he was a great storyteller. So if you came to our farm, my daddy would say, do you know about corn, Missy? That's probably what he'd say. Do you know about corn? And you know, you're a city person, you don't know about corn. You'd say no. And if you know, it wouldn't matter whether you didn't say that. He'd say, come over here. And he'd pick out his pocket knife out of his pocket, and he'd go over and he'd take a corn stalk. This would be earlier in the season when it was just about yay high, and he'd count up the number of crotches where the leaves were coming out of the stalk, and he'd know just where to go, and he'd take off a leaf and he'd cut into that stalk, and he'd have something in his hand that he took from the stalk, and he'd open it up to you, and it would be a tiny little baby ear of corn that looks just like a big ear, except it's only that big. And then he'd tell you the whole story of how corn grows and develops over the season, gets to be so big, and gets to be at the place where we were on that August day, which is when the silks are there in the corn. The silks are the little female part of the kernels that come out of every single kernel, and they're hollow, and they have to be just the right of moisture, and they go out on top of the ear, and on the top of the plant where the male part of the plant is the pollen. That's the male part, and those silks have to open up at just the right moment when the pollen is there, and then the microscopic pollen falls on the split silk, and it closes up, and now that kernel is fertilized, and there'll be a kernel on the ear. But 2 weeks before that time and 2 weeks after, if you don't have enough rain, you won't have enough kernels on the ear. So Daddy loved to tell that story, but at dinner time that day, the worry was, we're not going to have good pollination if we don't have a rain. So it was exciting time. In August, you can't do anything. You've already planted, you already cultivated, the corn's all big. You just worry and wait, which farmers are real good at the worry part. So Mama went into town to get some groceries. Daddy went into the couch to take his every single day 26-minute nap after dinner. And I was just playing in the family room. It was too hot to go outside, and the phone rang. Now, we had still one of those Lassie phones. Lassie, if you ever watch Lassie, you know it's a phone. It's a wooden box on the wall with a mouthpiece that comes out and a earpiece that hangs out here on a hook, and you're on a party line. We were on a party line. And the way it works is the Wards were 1 ring, the Kesslers were 2 rings, the Bidners were 3 rings, and we were 1 short ring and 2 longs. Well, the phone rang. Now, I was a little boy. I'm not supposed to mess with the phone. I can't get to the phone. It's up high on the wall, but I know something's different this time because it's not all those different rings for everybody. It's just ring, 1 big long ring. I run into my dad. I say, Daddy, 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 the phone, there's trouble. Listen. He wakes up. He recognizes the warning signal, which is 1 long ring, which tells everybody on the party line to pick up the phone and listen. He goes, he picks it up. Okay, we'll be right over. Hangs up the phone. He says to me, there's trouble at Harold Ingold's place. Get your shoes and your hat. It's hot outside. We gotta go. We get in the pickup truck. We start driving to Harold Ingold's place. I say, Daddy, what's going on? He says, Johnny Ingold, your good friend, has been lost for several hours, and they think he's in the cornfield. So we drive a little far, and I think about that, and then I think, Daddy, don't we need a shotgun? He looks, thinks a minute, and says, no, son, if we need the shotgun, Harold Ingold's got one. Then we drive a little bit farther, and I think of something really that bothers me. I remember just a few months earlier, in the springtime, when we had still a little bit of wheat in the field, and it was only about yay tall, I had done this secret little thing with Johnny. I had made us a little cubby hole to hide in, because we went out in the wheat field and we mashed us down a little path out there about 30 yards, and then we got down and we rolled this way and we rolled that way and we rolled this way, and we made us a square, about 10-foot square. It was our own little cabin fort in the woods. Big sky up above, 3-foot walls. We had trucks and little toy soldiers and all kinds of things in an old cigar box back there, and that was just our little place. And we played back there several times when he came over. And I had shown him how to do that. And it was our hidden secret place. And I'm thinking, Johnny went in the cornfield. Well, we drive up to Harold Ingold's. Now, Harold Ingold was a big, burly, strong, gentle, kind German man whose ancestors came in 1870 and built the drainage ditches that drained all the wetlands, that left all the rich topsoil where our farms were, and his ancestors were there and he stayed. And Harold Ingold was a Mennonite. Now, in my community where I grew up, we had this amazing diversity, rich diversity of Protestant denominations. We had Baptists, we had Methodists, we had a few Lutherans, and we had the Christian church, which is where I went. And this was always a problem, because we get around as little kids and talk on the schoolyard, and we talk about it, and they'd say, I'm a Baptist, I'm a Methodist, and I'd have to just say, well, I'm a Christian, and they wouldn't be very impressed with that. They'd just say, well, okay, we are too. And then most of the kids, because it was the biggest church, would say, well, we're Mennonites. And I just thought the Mennonites were so exotic. And they had the biggest church and the best music and the biggest youth group. And most important of all, my mother and daddy would always say these wonderful things about the Mennonites, because the Mennonites were the people who, when anyone died, they were the first people there with a casserole. Whenever anybody had an accident, they were the first people there to help. And if your barn burned down or got blew down in the storm, they all come up in their pickup trucks, and they were all great carpenters. In just a couple of days, your building would be back up. And whenever Mama wanted to talk about how good moral Christians should act, she'd always say, you should need to be like those Mennonites. So I knew that my daddy was eager to return a favor to Harold Ingold. So we pulled up. Daddy says, you stay right here. He didn't need to say, don't go in the cornfield. You stay right here in the shade, and we'll get this done. Well, so they started a search party, and they started walking through the corn rows. Now, if you're walking through, you can see maybe 2 rows over on both sides. 12-foot high, it's totally thick jungle. It's hotter than blazes. Those leaves can cut you. It's just miserable. We see in the distance thunderclouds forming. And the search party goes through. And they go through once. They go 1 mile down. They move over. They come back. I see them all come back. They check on each other. Nobody see anything. They move over and they go again. And then I see Harold Ingold comes out by himself. He sees where the search party's going, and he sort of puts his hands on his hips, and he looks, and he gets this pained look on his face, and he sees that great big brand new tractor sitting in his farmyard. And then he makes this big decision. Gets up on the tractor, starts that John Deere up, and starts plowing through that fine corn crop, taking down 6 rows at a time. You could hear those stalks falling, clop, clop, clop. You could think about the bushels of corn and all that money that would make that tractor payment just falling down. But Johnny's lost in the cornfield, and the bears will get him. Well, the search party comes back. They haven't found him. Everybody takes a breather. We hear the tractor go down to the end of the row. We hear the tractor come back, and then we hear the tractor stop. Then we all hear it start again. We patiently wait, and when they appear out of the corn jungle, little Johnny is hanging on to Harold Ingold's neck, not saying a word, not moving a bit. He's 3 colors. He's pale underneath. His cheeks are bright red flushed, and on top is a yellow frosting of corn pollen. And right down the middle of both cheeks are 2 long tear trails. Well, they take Johnny inside, and pretty soon Harold comes out and says, "He's going to be okay, folks. You're really good neighbors. Thanks for coming over." And as we all pulled off home, the thunder clapped and the sorely needed rain fell. Well, it wasn't long after that I ran into Johnny again, and he was his usual old self again. And when I got him over to just the 2 of us, I said, Johnny, tell me what happened. What happened when you were lost in the cornfield?" And Johnny said, "I wasn't lost. They just didn't know where to find me." I said, well, what'd you do? Well, he said, I just got tired and I sat down. I said, "Well, did you hear him? Did you see him? The bears?" And he thought a minute, and he paused, and he said, "No, I didn't see him, but I heard him. I heard him coming." I said, "Oh, what'd you do? What happened?" "Well, my daddy, he came on that tractor just before them bears got me. And let me tell you, don't you go in that cornfield. You'll get lost, and the bears will get you."